And we're already started? Damn, that was quick this time. All right, we're here for the MMA Vivisection for UFC 195. This is Zane Simon. I'm joined by Connor Rubish. We are both from BloodyElbow.com. Here to give you the full breakdown on Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit and all the other fights on this UFC 195 fight card. Looks like an action-packed evening.
Yes, it does. It's a weird card. They've
Mm-hmm.
got the biggest fight pass prelim ever in Dustin Poirier versus Joe Duffy, which is still as great a fight as it was the first time around. Weird that it's on the prelims, but there's some business sense behind that. And yeah, a lot of these are not. I wouldn't say this is a card with a ton of relevant fights. When you look it over, a lot of the fights, you're kind of like, why does this matter? But when you think about the matchup for just 1 second, there are very few that don't all but guarantee excitement.
Yeah, I mean, the best part to me is that I know I just said this before we started the show up, is that there are a lot of action fighters and fairly one-dimensional fighters on this card, which usually means that you have a lot of very particular, like how this fight is going to look in one sense or another, and it's probably
Sure.
not going to, and hopefully the hope being with that is that nobody gets frozen up because they're trying to decide what they want to do because they don't
Yeah.
really have a plan.
Yeah, it's not that all the fights are perfectly predictable, but there is a clear clash of styles in many of them.
Yeah. So with that usually should lead to a lot of fun action fights. I mean,
Mhm.
like hopefully like we saw with Ryzen Day 1. I don't know if you watched the
I saw some of the bouts.
yeah, but that was an event that had a lot of really like one-dimensional action fighters and it had 11 first-round knockouts.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it'd be nice if we saw something a little like that on this card. Just a lot of fun, aggressive talent on it. So, on that note, I don't know. There's not a lot to spend ruminating on. We'll talk about Dustin Poirier, Joe Duffy when we get to it, as being like the weird outlier here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let's just dive right in. First up, Edgar Garcia, Sheldon Westcott. Thoughts on this fight?
Well, this is one of those. This is probably one of the more existentially meaningless fights on the card. Not to insult either of these fighters, nothing against either of them, but neither of them have yet gotten to a point or been promoted to a point where they have any kind of promotional relevance.
It's
More
not
so
just a
than
promotion.
more so than a lot of the fighters in this card. Um, I think again we got some pretty clear parameters here. Westcott is really kind of a jiu-jitsu based fighter. He kind of reminds me of a very retro jiu-jitsu where it's like go after you as hard as possible, get to the clinch, drag you to the ground, and then work a good positional ground game and look for submissions. Kind of like he's not Rickson Gracie, but kind of the Rickson Gracie approach. And then
Mhm.
Edgar Garcia is like a Chuck Liddell model of sprawl and brawler. Like both of these guys are very kind of outdated models
Mhm.
of fighter archetypes that we still see. It's kind of this one's probably more than any other feels like a toss up in my head. But I'm going to go with Edgar Garcia. I think Westcott doesn't tend to do that well after the first round. Garcia has been submitted, but if he can fight off those takedowns and sprawl on them enough, I think he can start sneaking in punches. And Westcott's striking is really, really awkward and herky jerky. So if Garcia can make it a striking battle, then I think he can win.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like I have to pick Westcott here, even though I know like if this fight goes longer than a round, his chances of winning just drop exponentially. But he is a like for that round, he is a really, really much better athlete than Edgar Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has a great ability to start a scramble and immediately find a submission in that scramble.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is a really great on the fly grappler. And Edgar Garcia is not the guy who is expert at keeping people at range and keeping people off him. So I see this being one of those times, like Edgar Garcia, I feel like is just the right opponent for Westcott to be able to just jump on, drag down, and hit like an instant rear naked choke for a 2-minute win. But of course, if he doesn't, I mean, that's kind of you're banking on the outlier. So if that doesn't happen, then it turns into a sloppy, ugly brawl where chances are Edgar Garcia has better cardio than Sheldon Westcott.
And he's just a more natural striker than Westcott in that kind of fight.
He is. I was trying to think, who was it that Westcott faced last time? Not to get too Pavel Pavlak. And Westcott got exactly the fight he wanted out of Pavlak, and it still gassed him out.
Yep. And that's the kind of thing that's in my head. Like Pavlak is a guy who is just kind of let you do what you want and then adapt to that. And Westcott, I mean, I don't even know that Pavlak even made any incredible adaptations. Westcott just went after him, fought really, really hard for the takedowns, got a little ground time in, and then by the second round, he was still trying to do the same thing, but he just couldn't do it anymore. Like it's really based on him having enough stamina because he's not a super technical takedown artist. He doesn't seem to have a really smart head for he's not very well schooled in terms of getting his angles and stuff for his dumps and things like that. So when his energy starts to run out, and I think because of the lack of technique, his takedown game is very inefficient.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. He's definitely the kind of guy who picks you up and throws you to the ground.
But he goes after it. He's aggressive in that first round.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick Westcott's aggression and athleticism against Garcia, but yeah, I'm not going to be at all surprised if he loses this fight.
Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if either guy won.
All right. Oh, the odds on this fight are Edgar Garcia Sheldon Westcott is the favorite, minus 141 up to minus 175. Edgar Garcia, the underdog, plus 135 down to plus 120. So I wouldn't bet on that at all.
I wouldn't bet on this fight no matter what the odds were.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to Joe Soto versus Michinori Tanaka, and this should be a fun fight. I'm actually pretty, I like this fight. I especially like it because Tanaka is not a great striker at all, or a powerful one, especially not a powerful one, but just not a great one. And Joe Soto's biggest fault is his chin. So I am excited to see this become a very scrambly jiu-jitsu grappling match because I don't think either guy has the chops to take it over on the feet. And Tanaka especially doesn't have any of that like, oh, I think you might be able to out-grapple me, so I'm not going to grapple idea in his head. He's just like, I want to grapple you, so I'm just going to run at you and try to grapple you as hard as he's very much like Sheldon Westcott, but with a 2-round gas tank instead of a 1-round gas tank.
Sure. He's very much a Japanese fighter, that's the kind of fighting spirit that Japanese fans really love in their fighters. Just like you just go after someone. Tanaka is like that on the ground. He's just so damn dogged and determined. And he's got a real knack for exploding out of really bad positions where he is a fantastic scrambler without really relying on typical jiu-jitsu positional grappling to get where he wants to be. He ended up how many times being back controlled by Kyung Ho Kang in their fight, and it was still a razor thin, close fight. And he was really competitive. He spent almost the entire first round getting back mounted, but he just kept finding ways out of it. And that just speaks to how crafty he is. Who he reminds me of? More than anything, he reminds me of Uriah Faber.
I can see that.
He moves around a lot at range, not necessarily with any clear direction, but there's a lot of weird movement going on. He's like lunges in with these big single strikes. He doesn't have the blast double of Faber, but he's also a scrambling kind of grappler, and he uses his judo takedowns in the same way that Faber would use his explosive doubles. He creates these big moments where he can scramble to a position and get on top of you and do some damage.
Which I guess Team Alpha Male fighter.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's training there now, but he has in the past. So it kind of makes sense. His style meshes with that. And Joe Soto's a lot more schooled, kind of a classic approach, very like a modern boxer kind of approach to his striking. And then on the ground, he's maybe more of a classic jiu-jitsu type grappler, but a little too much sometimes. Where he's happy to sit on his back and play guard when it doesn't necessarily suit him. I kind of took over your thing here. You didn't make a pick yet. I'm sorry, but I think I think Tanaka wins a decision because of that. Because I think we are going to see this on the ground, And I think that Soto is just a little too willing to be in a bad position. And even if Tanaka does get in bad positions, he's never willing to accept them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tough for me because really the key to beating Joe Soto generally has been the ability to hurt him standing.
Sure.
Like he doesn't have his only other loss is a submission loss to Eddie Yagan via guillotine, and I haven't seen that fight, but I can just about guess, remembering Yagan, that Soto probably got stung with a hard punch and lunged in on a sloppy takedown and got choked out.
It also happened at 2 minutes into round one, so you can imagine it just
Yeah.
being like a cold start, fresh out of the gate kind of thing.
Yeah, because Yagan, he was a hard puncher, so I mean, in general, having punching power, that, like, Joe Soto beat Wilson Hayes, so like I don't know. I feel like he's just maybe a bit too patient. Like I think he's maybe a bit too patient on the ground to lose to Tanaka. Like I do think Tanaka is the more fun, aggressive grappler who's going to start a lot more scrambles, but Joe Soto is so like, no, I'm going to keep this position, and I'm not just going to give it up to you because you threw your legs up at me, or I'm.
Yeah, that makes sense. He could either be too patient to win or too patient to lose. Like too
Yeah,
patient to get out scrambled or too patient to escape if he's stuck on the bottom.
yeah, it is tough. Because Tanaka is the better athlete, and he's probably the better scrambler. But I think also just because, like with that Sheldon Westcott thing, I do feel like, he's also somebody that fades as the fight goes on a little.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily trust him to be able to stay with Joe Soto for every round, whereas Joe Soto is very much in peak condition. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick Soto here to, I'm glad this fight's probably gonna be exactly where he's best, and I think that that's going to be to Tanaka's downside. So I'll go with Joe Soto. Tanaka is the favorite though, minus 115 up to minus 130, and Joe Soto the underdog plus one or minus 105 up to plus 109. Oh,
Actually, a
minus
minus
115
115.
even. Yeah.
So it's almost dead even odds.
Yeah, it's basically dead even odds. I think that makes sense to me. You've got a better athlete and against a more experienced fighter, and they both love to grapple, and they're both good, solid submission grapplers. So it's going to be down to athleticism or experience.
It's a really fun matchup, and Tanaka's the kind of guy to bring a fun fight out of Soto because Soto is not always going to force an exciting fight.
Yeah, definitely. That brings us to our key under prelim, probably the most important prelim of the fight, and on headlining the Fight Pass card. And to hear the UFC tell it, it's because the guy who manages Fight Pass, he felt he was owed this fight because it was supposed to be on Fight Pass originally, and so he wanted it back on Fight Pass, and he argued for it. The UFC said, "Fine, you can have it," and that also does suggest to me, though, it's kind of like, well, what fights is the UFC willing to give Fight Pass? If this had been Albert Tumanov, Lorenz Larkin, would they have been willing to give this guy that?
Well, based on this and the fact that Anderson Silva, Michael Bisping is going to be taking place on Fight Pass 2, I think.
Yeah.
Pat suggested this to me on Heavy Hands, Pat Wyman, and I think it bears some weight that the UFC's deal with Fox ends after 2016. Maybe they're trying to lend some weight to the subscription-only model that the WWE has and say, look, even if it's not something they really want to go for financially, they can say, look, we can go to our Fight Pass only model. We don't have to get a deal with you. So it kind of makes sense because Poirier Duffy's a fight with decent international appeal, pretty well known. It's an action fight.
Yep.
There are people who would use this fight would be a reasonable reason to get Fight Pass. If you're like, well, that shit goes on Fight Pass, then it's worth $7 a month to get it.
Fair enough. There's no downside to the fight. There's nothing bad about it.
No, it's great to have Fight Pass that this is happening. Yeah. I'm glad I'll be able to watch it because I have Fight Pass and not cable, so I miss a lot of the other prelims.
Indeed. So on that note, you should be leading off with the breakdown here.
Well, it's still as awesome of a fight it was as it was the first time around. You almost there's a part of your brain that tells you that you have to pick against Joe Duffy or that you have to favor him less than he was the first time because he got flash KO'd in training. So you're like, oh well, against Dustin Poirier, but it can happen to absolutely anybody. Jose Aldo was just flash KO'd in 13 seconds. That's the pound for pound greatest fighter in the sport. It was at the time and best featherweight of all time. And he was knocked out in the quickest knockout title fight history. It doesn't mean he has a fragile chin. And Cain Velasquez, we've seen him get hurt, but similarly in the Junior Dos Santos fight, that didn't happen in any of their rematches. He didn't get knocked out that quickly. So I'm just going to go ahead and be rational and ignore the fact that Joe Duffy was KO'd in training. At least that's what the rumor is. I don't know if it was ever confirmed, but I heard that he was knocked out basically in his last weekend of sparring. I'm going to go ahead and say that doesn't change my opinion on this fight and still pick Joe Duffy like I did the first time around. I think Duffy has a great competitive ground game. He's a very strong wrestler. Obviously, I think most people would give him the advantage in that realm, in the grappling realm. But on the feet, I think he is a really, really slick and polished boxer, a little more so than Poirier. I think Poirier is the more dangerous striker. And Poirier is an intelligent fighter. He puts his combinations together really well. He seeks openings really well. He moves well, but he just doesn't have a sense for defense. He tends to hang around in the pocket a lot after landing his punches. He doesn't take very good angles, doesn't move his head an awful lot, really goes all or nothing with the offensive approach. And Joe Duffy is not that way. Joe Duffy's got great head movement. He parries and picks off shots and counters. He moves with his feet if he can't get his upper body out of the way. And he throws good technical hard punches as well. So I think you just kind of have to favor Joe Duffy. He could get cracked. It's really hard to count Dustin Poirier out. And I think the odds in this fight this time around are closer than they were last time. And for good reason, because Dustin Poirier is not to be counted out against pretty much anybody. But the chances of him being able to take everything that Joe Duffy throws at him, because Dustin Poirier has been hurt himself in the past, and Joe Duffy is certainly capable of doing that, like Eric Koch did, for example. I think the odds reflect the reality of the fight, but I think Joe Duffy is rightfully favored to win again.
I have trouble with this fight, and not because I don't like it, but because there is a part of my brain that is somewhat fundamentally distrustful of Joe Duffy.
Yeah, like as a hype job or something.
Not even that. It's mostly that I am very distrustful of his striking. And it's, he is a good technical puncher. He does move his head well. But he has a boxing style that is like, it's rare in MMA. You do not see many guys who fight like that. And I kind of wonder if it's rare because it's just not necessarily the most functional style in the world.
In what way?
In that it is very much like a kind of, I won't even say straight up and down, but it feels like it's a style that's predicated on not like it doesn't allow for great movement off combinations. Like he tends to kind of keep his feet set like a boxer when he's throwing, and I don't necessarily. I just like, I don't know. I don't trust it. Like I feel like it's the kind of style that I've seen guys. It feels more like the kind of thing that I see like Dominic Waters trying to copy it, and it's not as good when he does it, but it just feels like it's not made for MMA. Like it's very it's very punch heavy, very little kicking, very I don't know. I just don't trust it.
Personally, I think that I think a lot of MMA fighters are a little too focused on movement. I think, even very smart coaches like Brandon Gibson recently did a technique talk with Luke Thomas. And he's talking about how, the thing is the great new revolution of these wide, low stances. I don't really see the point of having a super wide stance. I think it takes away from, even wrestlers don't have super wide stances. I think it takes away from a lot of things like the ability to plant your feet and punch and move while you're doing that. MMA fighters tend to move every single time something comes at them. And
Yeah.
I think I've been waiting for a long time to see fighters who don't do that. So to me, Joe Duffy is kind of like a promise of better boxing in the future. Robbie Lawler doesn't move his feet every time someone throws something at him.
No,
And that's why he's such a dangerous counterpuncher. I do see what you're saying, though. It's almost sometimes he may not move his feet enough where he's too willing to hang around and stay in the danger zone.
Yeah, like he's I feel like he's just too reliant on upper body movement as the key focus of his striking defense. And as big a believer as I am in that, honestly, like I am a very much a non-believer in the keep your hands up method of striking defense. I worry about that. And partially I worry about that too because since he's implemented this style, he's never really faced a good striker.
It's true.
Like his best would be Damian Lapalus, who's good but not amazing, like top of the food chain. And Dustin Poirier, for his fault and for being very much an MMA striker who is not a terribly technical puncher when you get right down to it, he's really a very decent striker for MMA. Like he has a well-rounded game, and Conor McGregor aside, he has basically never been out-punched.
True.
So I have concerns for this fight. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, and Joe Duffy's got like he's so willing to work off the bottom and work his bottom game with triangle chokes and work off his back and stuff like that. And Joe Duffy has really good ground and pound, and I don't know. Like, there are just questions I have. I don't trust Joe Duffy.
This is how I feel about this fight too. I don't want to make it sound like I fully believe in Joe Duffy. I'm basically just saying last time I had this struggle, and I sided with Joe Duffy, so I'm just doing it again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Dustin Poirier. I just have this feeling, this image of them going blow for blow, and Duffy getting cracked, and then being willing to play a guard game and getting beat up there.
Yeah, I have great belief in Dustin Poirier's ability to punch with his opponents. I really do. And like you said, you can hit him, and he can be hurt and everything, but he tends to respond really well to being in difficult spots. And he is not a guy that you want to hang around with and just trade punch for punch.
Yeah, he reminds me a bit of Jose Aldo in the pocket. A much less technically clean Jose Aldo.
Just less defensive Jose Aldo.
Yeah, less defensive. But when Jose Aldo gets hit hard, he tends to respond with like this huge extra gear of like, okay, now I'm going to punch you way harder than you've ever been punched before.
Yeah.
And you're going to stop punching with me.
Yeah, and Robbie Lawler's got a little bit of that too. I agree. Dustin Poirier is a guy who he has a competitive nature to the way he throws his punches.
Yeah, it's like you start hitting him, and he's like, okay, well, shit, I'll just sit down and hit you really hard. And then guys stop hitting him. Except Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor is infinitely that gear all the time. He starts in that gear and then stays in it no matter what you do.
Yes.
So, I'm gonna pick Poirier. I don't know. I'm going all under. I picked Westcott and he was the favorite, but I'm going back to back underdogs here. Joe Duffy is the favorite, minus 165 to minus 200. Dustin Poirier, the underdog, plus 145 up to plus 164. And I see it. I think it's reasonable, but I also think that Poirier would be the most meaningful fight that Duffy has ever won, even with wins over Conor McGregor and Norman Park already under his belt.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, well, especially because this is Dustin Poirier at the peak of his powers.
Exactly. And I think Dustin Poirier has already, won a few fights that are of this stature, beating guys like Diego Brandao and Eric Koch. Even if they're not maybe technically on Duffy's level, they're guys who have good established careers as competitive top talent.
And if Poirier wins, get him in the title mix, man. I say throw him right in there against the top 5 fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that brings us to the start of the Fox Sports 1 prelims. Drew Dober, Scott Holtzman. Man, this is an action fight against between two guys who are I don't know. Like Holtzman just has a ways to go because he's a really young fighter without a lot of experience at all. Dober has a long ways to go, and it has nothing to do with experience at this point. Dober has been around the block a lot. He is 15-7-1 now. He started fighting in 2009, and he's still a low power, high volume kickboxer. And he's not a wrestler. He's from Nebraska, and he's not a wrestler. Like
I love it.
I don't think that's possible. I have to assume that he's like really actually from I don't know, like I don't even know, like Florida or something.
Has he done any training with brother-in-law Nick Hine?
Yeah, I'm sure he has, but
I mean, that'll be good for him for his takedown defense.
yeah, it will. Like it, although I don't know that if he's over in his camp is Mid America Martial Arts, and Hines out in Thailand, so I don't know how much time they would have actually spent together, but
Not many places further from Thailand than Mid America.
yeah. Like Holtzman has the kind of upside that I think will really turn into something. He's a good, powerful athlete. He seems to have a good feel for fighting, but he does not have many technical tools at the moment. He's very much a bite down on the mouthpiece and just come after you really aggressively and hope that somewhere in all of that he lands the bigger shots and gets it done. And Dober's tough, high output. I feel like this is a fight that Dober is going to edge a very close split decision just off technique. But I guess that's my pick. It's really it's very much a toss-up fight.
I agree. I think Holtzman's got a lot of potential. He's actually 32. Did you know that? He's older than I thought he was. But
yeah, he's not young, but it doesn't matter. He started fighting in 2012. He's barely come into this sport.
Right. And kind of like Mike De La Torre, who's in a similar boat, also training out of the MMA lab with John Crouch. He's there's something in that gym. They let people who are late comers pick things up really, really well. Same with who's the woman that I foolishly picked over Tisha Torres, who got murked?
Oh, yeah. Jocelyn Jones-Lyberger.
Right. But she's very good for being pretty much a novice. She's just athletic. I think John Crouch seems to have a good eye for that. And Holtzman has a lot of the intangibles of being a good fighter. He seems to have a really natural sense of distance, timing, I guess you'd call it proprioception, where he just kind of knows when to let his hand go to hit the opponent when they're going to be in this spot. And he did that in his fight with Anthony Christodoulou. He was all over him constantly. Christodoulou could not avoid Holtzman's right hand. He couldn't even pretend to avoid it because Holtzman was timing it perfectly every single time. And I think that'll go a long way. He doesn't seem to have a huge amount of power, but he's comfortable using those punches. He's comfortable pressuring, pretty comfortable countering, which tends to take a lot longer to develop. So like De La Torre, I think that says a lot about his training. And I just don't know where to go with Drew Dober at this point. Drew Dober is like, I always compare him to Michael Bisping. He doesn't have what Michael Bisping has. You know what I mean?
He doesn't have the wrestling and innate grappling, scrambling, and
he doesn't have that,
other fight IQ dimensions.
He also just lacks some of what Bisping has in the feet. Like, maybe it's the tenacity. Like Drew Dober can take a beating, but I don't think he claws his way to victory quite as well as Michael Bisping always has, where he's just sometimes getting slaughtered and you're like, damn, this guy can take a shot, but not, damn, this guy's coming back to win, which is what Michael Bisping has always had in his back pocket. So I think Holtzman, more powerful, more accurate, stronger wrestler. I just don't really see where Dober, and Dober's kind of more technical, but it's not like he's an incredible kickboxer either. No. So, I think I'm going with Holtzman. Decision win for Holtzman.
All right, I'm glad we're on the opposite sides of all these.
A lot of split picks.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's totally reasonable. Like, I think Holtzman is a better athlete. I think he's a more natural fighter. I just think that Dober has an experience edge that will serve him well here, and that and I remember Holtzman getting hit a lot by Anthony Christodoulou, which is at this moment like not a great sign. Like Christodoulou being at the very low ebb of guys that the UFC has brought in recent
Mhm.
memory. So,
But and lest we forget, Drew Dober does have a couple solid wins. You
yeah,
know, Jamie Varner, Tony Sims was a really solid win for him. I
yep.
think he probably should have lost that fight, but he was in it the whole way.
I think I see Dober as like Anthony Christodoulou 2.0, where like,
what a shameful title.
well, I mean, it's like because Christodoulou, for all of his faults, the reason he got to the UFC was that he's stupid tough,
Yeah.
and that in prolonged exchanges, he actually had a reasonable knack for finding a hard counter shot or two,
Hmm.
and he kept a high output, like you high pace, really tough, really poor athlete, just like rock bottom poor. And Dober is really aggressive, really tough, and not a rock bottom poor athlete. Like a reasonable, all right, middle of the road athlete.
Sure. Yeah.
And I feel like that step up is just enough to beat Holtzman right now. Maybe not in 6 months, but just right at this moment.
Sure.
So odds on this: Scott Holtzman is the favorite, minus 165 to minus 190, and Drew Dober is the underdog. So that's my third straight underdog pick. I am going out on a lot of limbs. Drew Dober is the underdog, plus 135 up to plus 160. Seeing the benefit of a lot of doubt. That brings us to Justine Kitch versus Nina Ansaroff, and I believe it's you.
This is one of the only ones on this card that's relatively easy to call. I think they are feeding Nina Ansaroff to Justine Kish.
Yeah.
And, Kish she's a little robotic. She's a little stiff. Doesn't necessarily look natural as a striker and everything, but she's strong. She's aggressive. And she does not stop coming after you. She seems to have good stamina despite her musculature. So, granted, I mean, the last hard call I made in this fashion was CB Dollaway knocking out Nate Marquardt, and look how that fucking turned out.
God damn it.
Right.
It makes me like, I'm happy for Marquardt because that was the least sad way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
That kind of shit makes me so angry.
It was Tim Boach, Dan Henderson all over again. It really was. So take a hard pick for what it's worth. And there's another one, a reminder of another hard pick I made coming up in our next fight. But as far as I can tell, Justine Kish wins this fight wherever it goes.
Yeah, there's a big difference in athleticism here, and the big thing I think for me is, and I feel bad because I wrote up a thing for I wrote up a welcome to the UFC article for Ansaroff when she came to the UFC, and I was basically like, here are all these bad tendencies she has, which means, and she has to fix them all. Otherwise, a fighter like Juliana Lima is just going to absolutely wrestle her into the ground. And Ansaroff was nice enough to write me a note on Twitter being like, you'll see what you know, ha 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 ha, I'll show you. And
that's so sad, man.
I feel awful about that.
That's fucking, and then it happened. That is heartbreaking. Yes. That's the worst.
Yes. So I feel terrible about that. I do. Because like the biggest thing is that when she gets pressured, when Ansaroff gets pressured, she tends to shell and then go for big spinning strikes. Like that is her answer to being pressured is I have my back against the cage. I'm going to go for a spinning back fist now. And especially when your back is against the cage, a spinning back fist is like as low functioning strike as you can get.
Yeah. She just doesn't have a round winning style,
No. It's very predicated on big single strikes, big flashy. Like if you give Ansaroff a ton of space, she's a good kicker. She can uncork some nice shots, but she closes herself down as she does so. So she's always walking herself out of her best range.
Yeah.
And she's very willing to pull guard, very willing to go for spinning strikes, very willing to do really low percentage things to augment her game. Like it's just kind of a grab bag of low percentage stuff, which is why with every step up she's taken in competition, she's lost. Now, granted, Justine Kish doesn't have the wrestling that Juliana Lima has. Lima is really one of the best 5 wrestlers at 115, I would say. Um, but Kish is a great athlete with a good studied, practiced style, very consistent performer, and the kind of fighter that I just don't think Ansaroff can beat. So, yeah, I think you got to take Kish here. Odds are in Kish's favor. She's the biggest favorite so far, not the biggest favorite on the card, but the biggest favorite so far, minus 230 up to minus 275. Ansaroff is the underdog, plus 185 up to plus 220. And I should say that Kish has been out forever with an injury, so there is always a sense of how well will she come back. She hasn't fought for 2 years. But I think generally with her inexperience and relative youth, she should come back pretty strong. I expect somebody who's been in the gym. Like, I know she got healed up months ago and has just been training since then. So this is not like, oh, my injury just healed and now I'm jumping right back into a fight. It's her injury healed up last summer and now she's taking her debut.
Mm-hmm. Which good for her. You hate to see people like rushing themselves in there. She's only 27 too. Like, she's got some serious potential to be a solid fighter in this division.
Absolutely. So next up, Kyle Noke, Alex Morono. Basically, this is Kyle Noke is fighting a smaller, greener version of himself.
Yeah.
And if Kyle Noke, I'll make the pick really quick. Is if Kyle Noke shows up like he did against Peter Sabota, which he looked in shape. And the thing, and unfortunately, Kyle Noke has periodically shown up as this version of himself. Like, this is not a new thing. This is not the new and improved Kyle Noke. This is a Kyle Noke who beat Chris Camozzi with relative ease. This is the Kyle Noke who, beat Casey Escola and Brian Ebersol and George Soteropoulos. Like, he has had these moments throughout his career where he has been this good a fighter. It's just they don't happen all the time.
Yeah.
So if that Kyle Noke shows up, he should absolutely beat Alex Morono, who is essentially Kyle Noke, but smaller and greener. Like, can't depend wholly on his striking, can't depend entirely on his grappling. Kyle Noke actually has some better wrestling, but neither of them are phenomenal wrestlers, and neither of them are phenomenal athletes. But Kyle Noke is big, and he's proven that he's tough as hell. So I think you have to pick Noke here, especially coming off that Sabota loss where he's facing, or Sabota win where he's facing somebody who, is frankly been more impressive than Morono to date.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and borrow the line from my Sherdog preview write-up for this. I say I'm as sure that Noke will win this as I was that Peter Sabota would beat Noke back in November. And I was real sure. I was really, really sure. I counted Noke out in that fight. Damn, did he show up? And we knew that. I think you probably mentioned it in the vivisection for that fight. We're saying, yeah, occasionally Noke, I think Dallas actually said it. Dallas is like, occasionally Noke will just show up and wreck somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did. He just showed up and he wrecked Sabata with one of the most beautiful body kicks I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing he can do. I don't even know. I don't know what Alex Morono can do. I'm talking about Morono now the way I talked about Noke compared to Sabota then. Like, oh, he's not urgent enough here. He doesn't have this transitional bridge between these two types of his game. It's just like Morono he's Noke, but a lot less developed. Like you said, he's not a great striker. He's, very hittable, particularly like with the boxing defense. He's very hittable. He's an okay grappler, but he plays off of his back too much. It's just like kind of a wishy-washy mess.
It's especially kind of a mess because he's not actually an awful striker. Like, I don't want to get, I wouldn't give that impression. Like, he is consistent enough, reasonably in his striking.
Yeah, it's a weird striking though. The same with Noke, right? Like Noke, you let Noke give him room to work, and he looks pretty damn amazing. He can throw a wide variety of kicks. He's moving and bouncing around at range, really smooth and athletic looking. Throws good straight punches. But then you get him into a dogfight, and it's like, it's like this guy's hit the bag a lot, but his sparring maybe needs a little bit more practice because he
Yeah.
kind of starts to look jumpy and weird. And Morono is that in spades.
Yep.
So, Kyle Noak. But, who knows what I know? Apparently, I cannot predict a Kyle Noak fight. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is he's a guy that lost to Patrick Cote in a terrible fight. That was like one of the worst fights. It was just bad, 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 bad. And obviously, Cote has looked better since then too. Like they both, Noak and Cote, have looked a lot better since that fight.
looks like they got all of their terrible fighting out in that one performance.
Seriously.
That was the purge of terrible fighting for both of them.
Yeah, but I mean, and he lost Andrew Craig, who is also one of those dudes that is just like mind-bendingly uninspired.
If it means more Peter Sabota front kicks, then I vote we have Patrick Cote and Kyle Noak fight once a year from here on into perpetuity, so they can just get all of their bad habits out and then put on amazing performances.
Yeah, so you have to pick Noak, but Morono, I have seen him. He especially his kicking game. He has a wide variety. Like I've seen him throw some nice flashy spinning back kicks. He did some amateur kickboxing. He's not bereft, and I think he'll improve. But you got to pick Noak right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a weird fight. Like it is just Noak fighting mini Noak.
Yeah. Yep.
So on that note, Kyle Noak is the favorite, minus 295 down to minus 330, or yeah, minus 330, and Morono is the underdog, plus 215 up to plus 274. Next fight on the docket is I get myself confused here. Michael McDonald, Masanori Kanehara.
Good to see Michael McDonald back. It is really good to see him back.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, it's so hard to even imagine that 2 years ago, this guy fought for the interim belt. He fought Renan Barão. It's so hard to even remember now that Renan Barão was a champion. There was a time before TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah.
And Michael McDonald was at the top of the heap back then. And then a bunch of injuries, long layoff, scheduled for a fight, and then it fell apart. Looks like he's all healed now, wrist injuries and stuff like that. Hopefully everything's better, and I'm happy for it because Michael McDonald has all the talent in the world to be a great fighter in this division, and he's still only, 24?
24, yeah. And in fact, I think this is probably the best thing that could have happened to him.
Maybe, yeah. Rather than getting burnt out and fighting a lot of top competition over and over that early in his career.
Yeah, I mean, he started in 2007.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. That was 8 years ago. Michael McDonald started as a pro.
16, yeah.
Yeah.
Going the Canelo Alvarez route.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
dudes who do that do not last.
Yeah, they don't tend to. Yeah, I think this is a creditable comeback fight. I think Kanehara has some difficulties to offer Michael McDonald. He's a really awkward striker, but pretty powerful and has good timing. I remember that right hook that he landed on Alex Caceres off of the break. Just had him reeling across the cage and then came after him with all these elbows and punches. He's a killer when he lands something good, and I think he's kind of got that sneaky power. And then, of course, on the ground, he's really dangerous as well. And one of McDonald's problems has always been a willingness to play guard, something that, we'll see how much his wrestling defense has improved. But in terms of striking fundamentals or striking intangibles, and things that are hard to teach, especially to young fighters, McDonald has it. He throws feints really, really well. He's got a really natural sense of rhythm, great combination. He's a really organic striker where he would just put his punches together and find his openings as they present themselves. Uppercut, hook, uppercut, jab, straight right as you're exiting range, making all these little adjustments on the fly. A lot of things that are fantastic to see out of a young fighter. So hopefully he comes back and shows that. Could be a tough fight. Most likely, though, I think McDonald gets a first-round KO.
Yeah, Kanehara he's a great example of what like JMMA produces, which is like a grab bag of really bad habits surrounded by a very dangerous fighter.
Sure.
Like that's what a lot of the Japanese fighters seem to end up being. Is like they have all of these terrible things they do, where like they'll just some of it's just absolute unwillingness to lead exchanges. They'll just, as low output as can possibly be, or as high output as can possibly be, and the total unwillingness to back down and ever be defensive in any way, shape, or form. They'll, absolutely go submission over position. They'll do all sorts of crazy bad habits. But in with all that is usually a lot of really dangerous finishing potential.
Mm-hmm.
You get guys who are incredibly good at finding submissions, who, like Kanehara, have really sneaky power in their strikes, who are very, just very opportunistic fighters.
Well, you get veterans with long careers and guys with crazy frequent schedules, and I think that you end up with a lot of fighters who seem to have like secret powers.
Yeah,
they're able to just tap into these little bits of craft or secret knowledge that you only get through that kind of experience or that kind of regularity of fighting that most fighters we're used to, who fight 2 times a year and have been fighting for only 6 or 7 years, don't have.
Yeah, it's very true. So I like this fight because of that, because Kanehara has the potential, if McDonald comes out and gasses, if he has a big adrenaline dump and he just, he goes for a flurry early and doesn't get it, because it's not like Kanehara's an easy dude to finish,
No.
He's been knocked out a few times, but it's all been by super hard punchers, typically, until you get back to way, way early in his career. Marlon Sandro, Yoshiro Maeda, Rasul Mirzaev. So McDonald could do it, but if McDonald can't finish him and just gasses out because he's been out for 2 years and isn't ready, then Kanehara has the ability to make this fight hell on him.
Or if McDonald comes out really trying to make a statement and comes out too aggressively, he Kanehara is the kind of guy who will clip you with an awkward right hook coming in and put your lights out.
Yeah. These things are all possible. I still think that the big safe bet is McDonald, who he's just too stellar an athlete, and he has that natural feel for fighting. He knows, he just knows how to fight. He knows how to fight well, and I just hope that, like we said, I was saying, with him starting when he was 16 and him being 24 now, I just hope that we're not talking about somebody who ends up having to be done because he can't stay healthy. That is my worry with those hand injuries, is that that may just be the career-ending product of starting fighting when you're a teenager.
You think any of these guys go to train with bare knuckle karate guys and learn how to hold their fists correctly and stuff like that? I think a lot of hand injuries in MMA come from people not aligning their hands properly. Daniel Cormier.
Definitely see a lot of dudes who end up weirdly punching with some weird part of their hand, or clubbing with
I'm so shocked that Junior Dos Santos doesn't have the most battered hands in the world. And you can find a million stills of Daniel Cormier hitting people with his thumb open like he's wearing boxing gloves, stuff like that, not closing his fists correctly. And he doesn't do it anymore, and he hasn't had a broken hand in years.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it is technical, and I hope that maybe McDonald, if that was the case, I haven't looked carefully, but if it was, I hope he's corrected that, and that it's not an inherent injury proneness.
Yeah, Uriah Faber is the king of awkwardly landed punches that break your hands 1,000 times.
Yeah, pretty much. Fedor Emelianenko, Igor Vovchanchin, these bare knuckle guys who just throw with reckless abandon. There's a reason bare knuckle fighters didn't swing away at people's heads as much as they could, or without forethought. It hurts. It hurts you.
So I hope that isn't the case with McDonald. Either way, I'm looking forward to a big return here, and I think this should be. I think it should be a good showcase win for him, but if he's off his stride at all, it'll be a really fun fight.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, McDonald is the biggest favorite on the card. He is -500 up to -600. Masanori Kanehara is the underdog, +475 all the way down to +350. That's fine by me, honestly. I mean,
wide by my standards, actually. I think it's a little wide. It reflects, I think, like I said, I think by and large the most likely outcome is McDonald KO. But we both agree that Kanehara is a pretty good comeback test. He's a test. not just a get over win.
Yeah, like I say, if you're off your game at all against Masanori Kanehara, he's the kind of guy who will either beat you or come very, very close to beating you. Like he will be there all fight, doing all sorts of weird shit that you're not ready for.
Yeah, all sorts of weird shit. That's a lot of the Japanese fighters we have in the UFC right now.
All right. On that note, that is the end of our prelim card. So we're on to the pay-per-view opener now, and it is the prototypical action pay-per-view opener, a fight that is absolutely guaranteed not to go 3 rounds. And if it does, well, shit. I'm sorry, everyone. Abel Trujillo, Tony Sims. I like this fight a lot because it is like, this is the, we've been talking about how there are all these like very sort of tracked in predictable action fighters on this card, and this is the most predictable action fighter fight in the history of predictable action fighter fights.
Yeah, pretty much.
Both guys have some wrestling, just enough to get by, but mostly they are almost entirely boxers. Trujillo has a bigger mix. He'll mix in, got a little more Muay Thai in his game. When he's really flowing, he'll throw some nice elbows and really brutal knees if he can get a plum. But Sims is exactly the kind of guy to elicit the worst possible fight from Abel Trujillo. Like, just, because Sims, he's not a great athlete, and that will always be the thing that keeps him from rising up beyond being a fun action fighter. But he's a solid, very powerfully punching boxer. And with the kind of timing and practice in his boxing that most MMA fighters just don't have, they're just not really able to match it. If they try and just sit in the pocket and throw hands with him, he's much more comfortable pocket boxer than most MMA fighters. Like, most guys are just not comfortable in the pocket at all. Tony Sims is very comfortable there. Abel Trujillo is kind of comfortable there. Abel Trujillo wants to be comfortable there.
Yeah, I think Abel Trujillo is chronically uncomfortable there, but he is determined to be there.
Yeah, and that makes this an amazingly great fight, because Abel Trujillo is almost certainly going to get cracked really hard, and he's almost certainly going to crack Tony Sims really hard. And once Abel Trujillo gets cracked really hard, he's almost certainly going to fall the fuck apart and just try and blitz the hell out of Tony Sims with whatever he can. And it should end in strange tragedy for either man, and I'm not really sure which. I'm kind of want to say Tony Sims just because he's tough as shit. And Trujillo is chinny when he gets cracked. When he's not even chinny, it's that when he gets cracked, all of his defensive teachings just go out the window and he starts leading with his face and throwing both hands at once.
Yeah.
But he's a way better athlete than Tony Sims. Like, way, way, way better. Abel Trujillo is like top 5, top 10 lightweight athletes.
Although maybe only for a round,
Well, yeah, maybe for a round.
Although he definitely carries his power, because he lost that first round against Jamie Varner, and he was still able to deck Jamie Varner with one good punch.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually just for a round. I think it's just that when he gets flustered,
for as long as his composure lasts.
Yeah, it's as long as his composure lasts. So, I'm gonna pick Sims. Maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna pick Sims, but why not? Like,
I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about it.
I think Sims is a solid pick. I don't like Abel Trujillo. I know that's not, like, as an analyst, that's not what I should be bringing into this. So I'll just go ahead and put it out there so I can say there's probably some bias here. But, anytime I see Abel Trujillo fight, first of all, I see a guy who's just kind of a dick outside the cage. So automatically, probably I have more negative perceptions. But I see a guy who just loses it when he gets touched. I see a guy who is extremely, in the way that teenage bullies are, extremely insecure. And when he gets hit, he feels, and not like Jose Aldo and Dustin Poirier, where there's like this, I'm the best and I'm going to teach you I'm the best. It's I'm not the worst. I swear I'm not the worst. It's like this desperate attempt to just get back on top or to prove that you're not a bitch. And that's how he fights. You tag Abel Trujillo and he just goes nuts. And he gasses himself out because he's so tense. And, for a guy with such natural striking abilities, it's a shame because you put this guy in the clinch, you let him go to work with short knees and elbows, and he is a destroyer. You give him room and space to operate at range, and he will throw in some really technical, hard shots and pressure you and cut off the cage well and all these things. But it just turns into brawling when he gets hit. Tony Sims doesn't have that. I think he's not only more durable, but I think he's a more level head. We saw him get out-wrestled badly by Olivier Aubin-Mercier, but, Abel Trujillo is not going to do that. And in fact, if somebody's going to wrestle, I think it would probably be Tony Sims, maybe to break the rhythm of Abel Trujillo. He likes to hit those reactive doubles now and then. So I think Sims is going to pick Trujillo off coming in. I think he's going to counter him in the pocket and be able to take the punches both mentally and physically better than Trujillo can. And I think it'll be a really competitive, fun fight. And then a sudden downward slide when Sims hurts Trujillo and gets a stoppage in the second or third round.
Yeah. The only pause I have there is that, like, the athletic disparity means this could just be, like, in the first minute, it could be a matching of horsepower against horsepower where Sims finds himself being hit by somebody who is a lot faster and who hits a lot harder in a single shot than he does.
Yes, it absolutely could.
So
if Trujillo gets in his head to just come out early and wallop Sims and teach him a lesson, then but Sims, like Joe Duffy, Sims has actual boxing experience, and his experience is actually a little better than Duffy's in terms of competition. And so I have confidence in his ability to weather a striking attack that way.
Yeah, it's a fun fight, and it's just like I almost feel like too, if you're Abel Trujillo, like there's not a worse place that you could have gone than the Black Zillions, and he probably, like, if he was with Greg Jackson, that would probably do wonders for him.
Yeah, but Anthony Johnson, Abel Trujillo, Vitor Belfort, there's something about the Black Zillions that attracts this mentality.
Well, yeah, it seems like a camp that is willing to nurture that, like,
maybe
to be like. Oh yeah, we're comfortable with you being hot-headed and like willing to fly off the handle. Like, we don't care, basically.
Yeah, not trying to refine it, but like feeding it like it's good for you.
Yeah. Whereas Jackson Camp is going to make you fight it every day of your life. And when they get guys like that, they do an amazingly good job with them.
Sure. Or even other camps like Rafael Cordero will make you angry in the right way.
Yeah.
Rafael Cordero takes mild-mannered fighters and turns them into angry bastards, who only point their anger at their target.
Yeah. Cordero is great at making you a good angry fighter. Jackson's good at taking like really angry dudes and making them patient enough to be good fighters.
Bringing you zen.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Brian Ortega versus Diego Brandao.
This fight's bananas. Another bananas fight. Another one that doesn't feel very relevant at all.
No.
Though certainly Brian Ortega, being young and an action fighter and very dangerous, has a lot of potential for the future. This is a very, very tough fight for me to call. And I think a lot of people are going to easily make the Ortega pick here. And I think, like, I went and played a fantasy MMA game, and I, just so I could get into one of the games, I went and made a spot a week ahead of time without having thought about the fights yet. A week before I did my preview, so 2 weeks ago, I just put in the game, and I was like, all right, make some quick picks, and I'll adjust the team later. And Ortega was my automatic pick. And then I started looking at the fighters and looking at their footage, and I thought, I don't really know, because the thing is, it's like it's so hard to count on Diego Brandao.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've said this before in the past when we've talked about him. And if there's one thing I feel I can count on in this fight, it is that Ortega will be there trying to get a finish until the final bell. Unless he's stopped, he will be there, and he's not easy to stop either. So if that is the only reliable factor in this fight, and Brandao is never a reliable factor mentally, But from a purely technical, stylistic standpoint, I think Brandao has a really strong advantage in this fight.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he's the better striker. Brando's always been a pretty solid striker. He throws a lot of looping punches, but he's got great timing, really good sense of distance. He feints well. He changes levels and mixes his takedowns with his strikes.
Oh, we lost Connor for a second. He should be, if true to form, he should be right back in there. He is. All right.
Hello, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Happens once every show.
Yep, every time. It's got to. It's customary. Brandao throws combinations. He is this good, fluid, powerful striker. And then on the ground, he's a dynamo, especially in top position. He can also throw really quick, dangerous submissions from his back. He's aggressive enough to play that game. The problem is that Brandao quits when the going gets tough. Like, he loses confidence in himself and he quits. And he even said recently, he openly said, I quit in that McGregor fight. And yeah, you can see it. There's a part of him that just says, all right, this is too tough. I'm going to stop. And against Ortega, that could be a real problem. So you see why this fight is so damn hard to pick, because stylistically, feel like I have to pick Brandao. Mentally, I feel like Ortega has the edge, but Brandao has also shown up in tough fights and put on great performances. You know, he had really...
At his best day, Brandao is a top 10 featherweight. Like,
right, exactly.
A good enough athlete, and he's a good enough, well-rounded fighter everywhere. He's a good wrestler. He's a good grappler. He's a good striker. Like, he is technically good in all these areas.
And as much talk as there is of him having bad cardio, and he does freak out sometimes, I don't think it's that bad. You know, he tends to hang in a fight pretty well. His volume goes down, but that's because he goes so crazy in the beginning trying to knock somebody out, and then he just fights at a normal human pace after that.
Yeah. The only question I have is, I'm not sure where he's training right now, because I know a lot of people, you know, like, he has linked Jackson, or he shows with Jackson Wink on his Twitter bio. Sherdog says Jackson Wink, but I'm not sure that I don't think he's actually there anymore unless they brought him back.
Really?
Yeah. And I believe if I'm remembering correctly, maybe you can look at, like, I haven't seen any pictures of him training there recently or anything like that.
No, I'll take a look while you're doing your breakdown pick. I'm not sure. I wonder though, you know, like, at this point, we all know that Jackson Winklejohn's great for the mentally, the fighters with mental issues, with mental blocks and things, but it hasn't really worked 100% for Diego Brandao. So how much would it really hurt him, a guy with his natural fighting ability, to fight somewhere else at this point?
Well, I think it's worked to the extent that he's a guy who in 2009 and 10 was, you know, or 2008 on, was losing to dudes like George Clay, Rand Weathers, and Gert Kosani, you know, or Uriah Rodriguez. Like, the dudes that Diego Brandao, and, you know, as we talk about somebody who's extremely talented, used to lose to, are dudes that would never get a shot in the UFC. Like, he just used to lose terrible fights. Sure. And since then, it's Darren Elkins, Dustin Poirier, and Conor McGregor. Like, those are his 3 losses.
All really solid losses. There's a picture here on his Instagram from 2 days ago that is him in, I think, no, it's at the arena. It's with Team Brandao, and it's not any of the Jackson Winklejohn coaches that I recognize. So maybe he's still training there, but has some of his independent coaches, or
maybe. I think he may not be training there anymore. That is what I've heard. Last I heard, he wasn't training there anymore. Maybe he is now again, but that, you know, like I say, it may not matter at this point. Maybe he's got enough of his head on his shoulders to make that not matter. He certainly, I think, you know, if that were the case, it would also have been, you know, a place that he wasn't training for his Hedges fight and his Katsunori Kikuno fight. Like, that's, you know, when I heard that was a while ago.
Okay, and he looked both of those.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest questions here, it really is a question of, like, Ortega being a hyper aggressive, tough 3-round fighter, against somebody who's a lot better than him, and who is not nearly as consistent, because Ortega did lose most of that Thiago Tavares fight until getting the stoppage late. Like,
no, yeah, I thought he was losing it.
Yeah, it was a fight that he lost for like 2 rounds, and then Tavares got tired, and Ortega was able to start taking over.
Yeah,
And I think,
and he busted his face open
yeah,
horribly with a really fortuitously placed cut.
yep. And I think honestly, Thiago Tavares and Diego Brandao are very similar fighters.
Except that Brandao hits a hell of a lot harder than
Yep,
Tavares.
exactly. So it's a damn tough pick. Really tough. I I guess I'm gonna pick. You know what? I'm gonna pick Ortega.
We got to split on every single one of these damn ballots.
I know. I'm gonna pick Ortega to get a big upset win here, or not even an upset. He's favored.
Yeah, that's the
I'm gonna
crazy
pick
thing.
Ortega to get the win here, and for it to overvalue him enough to get put in a really tough fight.
Against like a solid together kind of featherweight fighter.
Yeah, like to get him a fight against somebody like Darren Elkins or something, who is just going to maul him for 3 rounds, and then get bumped back down. Like that's what I see. I see this as being like another guy that he can get a sneaky win over, and then people are going to be like, "Oh, Brian Ortega is the next legit real deal," and then he'll fight like Charles Oliveira or something, and you know,
And then it'll be bad news.
yeah, and then it'll
Well,
be
I
bad.
would love this Ortega Charles Oliveira though. God damn,
Yeah.
you mentioned that. That I've got hold on, excuse me. I got really excited just then.
Yeah, so that would be a fun fight. Ortega is the favorite, minus 183 up to minus 230. Diego Brandao plus 170 down to plus 155. And I would frankly say there's a chance bet on Brandao there as an underdog. I think he has a very, very legit shot at just beating the pants off Ortega.
And we don't really know. Like Ortega hasn't faced any big punchers. Like he could get blown out in the first round by Brandao.
Yeah.
He's hittable, you know?
Yep. His striking is ugly, ugly, ugly. And his grappling is very submission over position. Like he's a guy who will just dive on whatever he sees available with very little setup, and then, be forced into be on the bottom eating shots like he was for 2 rounds against Thiago Tavares.
He's a gambit fighter. He's a lot of fun,
Yep.
but there's a lot of risk in everything he does.
Yep. All right. That brings us up to what would be the main event of my heart. The main event of except of course the main event, which is the true main event of everybody's heart. But still, Albert Tumenov, Lorenz Larkin.
Some part of me was about to say the main event of my balls. I don't know why that came to mind. But this is a real hit you in the groin parts kind of fight. It's got that very visceral sort of feeling to it because holy shit, are these some crazy action fighters. Is it my turn?
I don't know. Go ahead. Run with it.
It's bananas. I think, Albert Tumenov is turning into one of the most dangerous strikers in the UFC. I really think he's got a great natural striking ability where he puts his in and not like he doesn't think, because I think he's a very smart, calculated fighter, and you can see his process at work when he's fighting. And you can see it evolve from fight to fight as well. You can see him adding things, not in the sort of video game character way where it's like, oh, new technique, I'm going to throw spinning elbows now, but where he's sort of adding layers to what he already does really well, which is
unlike Lorenz Larkin then.
Yes, right. We've got 2 very contrary approaches. In a way, this fight is kind of like Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit. With Tumenov is the stick to the basics and refine them endlessly fighter like Robbie Lawler, and Lorenz Larkin is the everything and the kitchen sink type of fighter like Carlos Condit. And in these kind of matchups, I tend to favor not to spoil my pick for the main event, but I tend to favor the refined, simple fighter. And I think that Tumenov just has a lot more going for him in terms of consistent long-term success, where Lorenz Larkin is always going to be able to shock you with one gigantic, stunning win. The thing is that he's always also going to be a letdown for people, because you see him go into a fight like the Ponzinibbio fight. I thought Ponzinibbio was going to win that. Ponzinibbio was doing well. It was competitive. And then Larkin gets this huge knockout. He really showed fantastic punching ability and everything, and everyone says, oh, he's back, he's improved.
Yeah.
But if you look at the details, it's just Lorenz Larkin being Lorenz Larkin. He's still getting backed up into the fence. He's still leaning straight back and not moving his head off the center line at all. He's still really relying on speed and variety and not necessarily on fundamentals like distance management and feinting and countering and, making the opponent miss and things like that. And that's Albert Tumenov's MO, is all of those little things. So I think this will be fun. This fight's insane, and I could never count Lorenz Larkin out entirely. But with that being said, I feel pretty strongly that Albert Tumenov is the better fighter here. I think he's just overall more reliable as a striker, and I think he will be making Lorenz Larkin miss, cutting off to side angles, backing him up into the fence, and taking advantage of that porous defense. I think he'll probably knock Larkin out in the second round, maybe the first.
Yeah. I mean, a big thing here is that, Tumenov's never been really beat on the feet. Like, he gassed himself out in that Alcantara fight after owning him in the first round, and then it ended up just being this really weird sort of, like, sloppy, ridiculous, ugly fight. But otherwise, Tumenov's not a guy that, like, unlike Lorenz Larkin, he's never just been beat in a straight striking battle.
Yeah.
And Lorenz Larkin has been several times.
And man, like with the Alan Jouban fight, he's gone with some guys who are always in competitive striking battles and made it look really, really bad for them.
Yeah. And the big thing I remember too out of the Ponzinibbio fight was that was basically a dead even fight, except that Lorenz Larkin was the much better athlete. He was faster, basically.
Yeah.
And Ponzinibbio could never catch up to that speed. And he may be he's probably faster than Tumenov too, but Tumenov is much more technical than him in a way that Ponzinibbio was not at all.
Yeah.
And Tumenov's got this economy of motion now at this point, that being faster than him isn't meaningful, or it's not nearly as meaningful, because he doesn't need to chase you. He doesn't need to, like, Jouban is probably faster than him, and Jouban tried to get away from him, and that did not work well at all.
Yeah. Is Tumenov like a master of sport in boxing or something like that?
Oh,
he seems like it.
He is,
yes.
Yeah. He's a national master of sport in boxing and hand-to-hand.
Okay. So, and he's got that Rashid Magomedov sort of Eastern European sense of distance and that type of movement that they tend to have. He looks like a boxer.
Yeah, he's incredibly solid, and yeah, it's just and like we saw in that Ponzinibbio fight, where Larkin was able to get the knockout. Larkin in general for his career, once he's taken steps up in competition, has not been an amazing one-punch KO artist. Like, he hits hard, but he rarely does it so consistently with his combinations that he will not, like, he can hurt you, but he's not there with the follow-up shot to knock you out. John Howard aside, it's always, if he gets it, it's almost entirely decisions, or it's a buildup of strikes over several rounds, or waiting for that perfectly placed counter when a guy gets really sloppy. And I just don't think Tumenov's going to give him those chances at all. So tough to pick Larkin here, even though it should be a fun as hell fight, and I expect him to be competitive all the way through.
Absolutely. I mean, that speed will keep him in there, and he has a lot of experience under his belt and a lot of tricks. So, I expect him to pull out some impressive moves, but it's just not it's not a style you can bank on against a dangerous striker like Tumenov.
Yep. I'm thinking second round KO, maybe.
My pick. Yep, I got you.
All right. On the odds on that, Albert Tumenov is the favorite pretty reasonably, -250 up to -270. Lorenz Larkin, the underdog, +190 or 185 up to +226. That seems about right to me. Could even see it being a bit longer, frankly, but
sure. I'm down with that, though. I think that, right around the -250, 300 range for Tumenov feels right.
That brings us to heavyweight bout: Stipe Miocic, Andrei Arlovsky, major questions will be answered in this fight. Andrei Arlovsky, he is a great example of head case fighters that went to Greg Jackson's and have become much, much better fighters because of it. Like, just a guy who throughout his career off and on has gotten gun shy. And he's not had a great chin anyway, but it's been exacerbated by defensive issues and a fact that he just didn't seem to like to get hit much.
You kind of get the sense that his chin was a factor of the fact that he was worried about being knocked out rather than the other way around. Like he was anxious about it, and that led him to flinch and receive punches poorly.
Yep. And took a while, but seems like Jackson Wink has really worked that out of him. We have seen him in some hard exchanges that have knocked out and would knock out most heavyweights, in which he walked through fire and won. We've seen him do it to Travis Brown. We've seen him do it. We saw him take a hell of a beating from Anthony Johnson, even. And yet we've also seen him fight Frank Mir and Brendan Schaub.
Yep. That's all you need to say. We have seen him fight those men, and that happened.
Yeah. And so on the flip side, we have Stipe Miocic, who feels still like he is this half notch below the very, what it takes to win a title.
Mm-hmm.
It just, something is not quite clicked with him to be this all over fluid style, whether it's the fact that he can still get stung a little in standing exchanges, or that that he's never quite as dominant a striker as he should be, or wrestler as he should be, in either. There's some little bit that is just not quite there. But is Andrei Arlovsky? I don't know. I feel like I have to pick Stipe here because I think Stipe is a much better technical fighter than Travis Brown.
By worlds, definitely. Yeah. Brown has never ever been technical.
Yeah. And I know he's more durable than Antonio Silva, and I know he has more to offer right now than Frank Mir, and more is willing to be more aggressive than Brendan Schaub.
Yeah.
And this is, running down the list of guys that Andrei Arlovsky has beaten lately. And I think if you're looking at a fight that is anything at all like the Travis Brown fight, with a more technical, more controlled guy on the other end of it landing shots on Andrei Arlovsky, I think that beats Andrei Arlovsky.
That fight was basically the Miocic Dos Santos fight, and Miocic, was it didn't take him 3 knockdowns before he found the counter left hook. He was in there with that punch and many others, often and early.
Yeah. And I don't think that Arlovsky, even though I don't question his chin, I don't think he's as stupid tough as Junior Dos Santos was at that moment, which is really kind of what saved Junior Dos Santos. Mm-hmm. This was still the stupid tough JDA or JDS before with this last bout, really. That it was another sapping brawl that took years off Junior Dos Santos' life to have him set up to be knocked out on the first set of hard shots landed by Alistair Overeem, which is sad in its own right.
Yeah, though I did say Overeem would win, so I'm smugging it up over here.
You should, absolutely. And I even in my all the I remember doing and I even said I just expected it to be a really depressing fight, that even if I expected Junior Dos Santos to win it, I did not expect it to be the kind of performance that would make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
There was this foreboding sense of doom over that fight.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that ended up being right on the money too. You were absolutely correct, though,
Oh,
man.
thank you. Appreciate it. I don't even know why I brought it up. I just look like nothing I can say now will make me look like anything less of a dick now for having brought it up.
Whatever. Just talk about this fight.
Well, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I like a lot of the direction that Andrei Arlovsky has taken.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wonder if the problems in the Schaub fights and the Mir fight, the problem with those fights was that his opponents weren't aggressive enough.
They weren't willing to engage.
Yes.
Schaub was gun shy, and Frank Mir just does not have any tools left. He does not have the ability to pull the trigger.
And the thing that's really, I think, brought Arlovsky back is kind of finding identity as almost a very purely defined counterpuncher.
Yeah.
Moving and drawing the opponent in and then blocking their first shot and coming back with that right hand, which is still as fast and straight and deadly as ever.
Yeah.
And that he's looked great when his opponent has obliged that. And then he has won very narrow decisions when they haven't.
Yep.
So, although I didn't really think the Mir fight was that narrow,
No.
but then again, I also didn't think I probably thought he should have lost the Schaub fight. So, half of one something doesn't whatever of the other.
Yeah, whatever. You're rambling.
So, Stipe Miocic will come towards him probably, but Stipe Miocic can also fight off the back foot. He can also wrestle. I just don't really see a phase where Arlovsky gets to fight his fight without having to worry about something else, And Miocic is the more varied boxer too. I think he's the more technical boxer than Arlovsky. There aren't many technical boxers Arlovsky has fought and beaten.
Yeah.
If there's somebody who can keep a jab out there and counterpunch him and defend themselves relatively well, then it's going to be at least a close fight, and oftentimes one that he loses. And, Arlovsky's this guy with a big right hand and speed and good timing, but Stipe Miocic has the combinations. He has the wrestling threat. He has the body punches. He has all these things together. So, yeah, I just feel compelled to pick Stipe Miocic.
One of the things, too, is that, as Arlovsky's gotten older, his as you said, his hand speed hasn't gone down. He has still got the kind of ridiculously fast hands that he's always been known for, but his foot speed has. He is no longer a incredibly light on his feet, fleet of foot dude. He's not bad compared to the heavyweight division around him. He's still much fleeter of foot than most of the guys he's faced recently. Certainly much lighter on his feet than Antonio Silva or Frank Mir. But it's not like, I do think that Stipe Miocic can just outmaneuver him at range, stay steps ahead of him, and fluster just enough, be able to kind of pot shot enough to draw some mistakes out of Arlovsky.
Yes. And I think Miocic has the better footwork from a technical perspective anyway. It's not like Arlovsky's been using incredible trap setting skills to counter. He's been a good counterpuncher because he's fast and powerful, and these are heavyweights. And they come in and leave themselves open, and they overextend, and they're there to be hit. Stipe Miocic actually takes pretty solid angles when he's on form. Like the Roy Nelson fight, he looks like a phenomenal boxer when he's on his game, and even when he's not, it's pretty solid, consistent.
So we're picking Miocic. He is the favorite, minus 215 down to minus 240. Arlovsky, the underdog, plus 170 up to plus 206. I think that's perfectly reasonable, especially at heavyweight. Heavyweight odds should never be that far apart.
Sure, yeah.
And that brings us to Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit. Take it away.
The fight. I think this fight is such a fascinating clash of not just physical skill sets, but the ethereal fighting styles of these two guys. Carlos Condit is, I'm going to borrow some phrases from our BE colleague, Phil McKenzie, who I think is really good at summing up these kinds of things. And he said in the comments of a Heavy Hands episode this week, he said basically that Condit's pool of techniques is very wide but shallow. And Robbie Lawler's is like Bolton Strid. It's just deeper than you could possibly imagine, and more dangerous than you could possibly imagine, but very narrow. and that's what I see in this fight, is that both of these guys adapt really well. Both of them make a lot of adjustments as a fight goes on, and that's what's kept them ahead. Carlos, very recent examples we've seen: Robbie Lawler coming back from a very difficult situation to knock out Rory McDonald, and Carlos Condit coming back against a surprisingly resurgent Thiago Alves to just decimate him in the second round of that fight, both with very pinpoint, very precise adjustments. For Carlos Condit, his adjustments are a little more detrimental to his personal well-being, where you know what I mean? You watch Carlos Condit fight, it is like he has to be taught what things are wrong before he can start making changes. Like he has, I said the phrase negative reinforcement this week, and I think that's it. Like he has to be hit in the face for doing something before he tries something else. And when he does try something else, it's like a whole new thing. It's like, all right, maybe a spinning kick, maybe a step in elbow, maybe a weird shifting combination. And then like the Alves fight was so weird because Condit has this, the Winkeljohn footwork is very strange and bizarre. And he does these shifting combinations where he'll march in with his punches. He did that to Thiago Alves. Alves stood his ground and countered and cracked Condit as he was coming in. And Condit just kind of shifted forward and like marched right into Alves's punch and then stumbled back away. And he does it again, the same exact thing, but he adds an elbow instead of a punch and almost gets countered again, but he destroys Alves with this elbow. So he'll just like toss different pieces in to this weird robotic style and it works. The problem is he's still getting hit while he's doing that. He's still racking up damage, and he gets taken down. He puts himself in these bizarre positions. Robbie Lawler is very much the opposite because everything is just strict, fundamentally sound. He's rarely out of position. He rarely looks beyond 3 or 4 weapons in each fight, where it seems like he comes in prepared to do certain things. And then even interacting with his opponent, it narrows that scope into where he's just looking for 2 or 3 punches and maybe a kick. He's not looking for that many things. And he adjusts these punches beautifully. He had great, tricky rhythm on the outside where he'll draw you in and bounce back. You think he's moving backwards, so you pursue, and suddenly he's changing direction and he's on you, and you just can't get this timing down. And he will keep putting this pressure on you in the pocket so that you're reacting on instinct, but he knows how you're going to instinctively react, and then he reacts to that and decks you. And he's, of course, immensely powerful, so tricky with that. But Robbie Lawler sometimes gets locked into this zone.
Yeah.
Like he had a success early against Johnny Hendricks with the kick, the left kick, great weapon for him. We saw how good it was against Matt Brown, against Jake Ellenberger. And then it just went away because he's like, oh, Johnny Hendricks wants to box with me. Okay. And he just boxed with him and did it beautifully, but ended up losing the fight because he was just trying to box in the pocket with a really hard hitter. And then, the Rory McDonald fight kind of became a jab off because Rory McDonald was there jabbing with him at range. And then he ended up getting kicked in the head because he was so locked in on this very specific thing. He's trying to find the answer in a very small data set. So it's tough. Robbie Lawler has the sharper, more versatile weapons, but Carlos Condit has a lot of them, a lot of things for Robbie Lawler to adapt to. So, like I said before, I tend to go for the guy with the more refined skill set. And I think that is Robbie Lawler, but he's also been hit in his recent fights. He's been hurt. Carlos Condit, I think, has a very sneaky type of power. And he's also, I think, more durable than Lawler, but he's a hell of a lot more hittable too. He is so hittable. He's always there to be hit. He was well on his way to losing that Tyron Woodley fight, just walking into counters over and over. Robbie Lawler is a better counterpuncher than Tyron Woodley. He's going to be there. He's going to be ready to sling straight lefts and right hooks every time Condit comes walking into the pocket. And if he wants to come after Condit, it's not like Condit's a great counterpuncher either. Yeah. So I pick Robbie Lawler. I feel fairly confident about it, but man, every time I keep running over this fight in my head, there's just so many ways it could go wrong or go right for both guys.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of it for me, honestly, is I'm not going to pick against Ruthless Bob. Not,
You can't.
I love Robbie Lawler. He is absolutely one of the best fighters and, most enjoyable fighters that this sport has ever seen. And I don't, I'm not saying that like, oh, he's the greatest of all time or anything like that. But if there's a guy to enjoy watching fight, like I it's Robbie Lawler. Like you're not going to get more out of a fighter, more enjoyment out of a fighter than you will out of watching him. And what you were saying too, I think talking about how limited how much he limits his tools and how much he limits what he's willing to use. That is really, I think it's got to be the key to what makes him probably the best, and maybe even just the best pocket fighter in the history of MMA. I'd be willing to say, and not the best clinch fighter, but the best pocket boxer.
Though he's pretty damn good in the clinch too.
He's good. He's great in the clinch.
Anybody who can beat Matt Brown up in the clinch is pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think that he's got to be. I can't think of anyone better. I can't think of anyone who has been a better pocket fighter in this sport.
Yeah.
And the reason being, you talk about, is that he's willing to limit his arsenal so much and then vary how he uses it, that I think it's, he does a great job of just keeping it these are the couple of tools I'm going to use, and then I'll focus the rest of it. The rest of my focus is on how to be defensive and consistently stay in front of you while using these tools. And a lot of fighters just can't do that. They get, they're like, no, I want to open up with my big combinations that I've been working on. So here's all 5 of my strikes and I'm just going to throw them. And it gets into this kind of predictable mess where you can see as they get they're confident for 1, they're confident for 2. As they get to 3, you can start to see the hesitation in their eyes. And by the time they hit 4, they're just like, oh shit, I hope I don't get hit when I'm throwing this 4th punch. I got to get out of here. And that's never Robbie Lawler.
No, when Robbie Lawler is in the zone, when he feels that rhythm and he's right on the edge of range at all times, that started to happen in the second round of the Rory McDonald fight.
Yeah.
That's some scary shit, man. He's just there. He's ready to hit you no matter what. And you have to react because you got to get him to back off. But he knows how you're going to react.
Yeah.
So scary.
And I mean, to his detriment too, he loves fighting that so much that he does not care if you hit him. He will just sit there and eat 3 or 4 shots if that means that he gets to stay in the pocket and then keep trying to figure out what you're going to do. If that gives him information to adjust to, he is happy to let you punch him 3 or 4 times.
Though shockingly hard to hit clean. Robbie Lawler is one of the best slow-mo fighters of all time because you can watch almost any exchange where you thought he got railed and you're like, oh, he started moving well before that punch landed, or he got his glove up just in time. Very hard to hit clean, but he is there.
Yeah. And, and I just don't I think the big key in this fight is going to be rounds 2 through 4, because Robbie Lawler is a great starter and a great finisher, and all the shit in between is hit and miss. He will be great for a round, and then his opponent will adjust or throw something different at him, and that whole next round is just going to be him trying to figure it out.
He's not always a great starter either, actually.
Yeah, he's not always a great starter either.
I called Brian Ortega a gambit fighter. Robbie Lawler is one of the most admirable gambits in MMA, where it's just it seems like Robbie Lawler doesn't give a shit about winning a round. He really is just looking for the opening to land those shots, and he will happily spend minute after minute just gathering the information.
And I think he's probably not a great starter in that I think he comes in with a very particular, this is my plan for the start of this fight. I'm going to do this. And if it doesn't work, that makes him a terrible starter.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does work, it makes him an amazing starter. He will come out with a fantastic first round because he knows exactly what he wants to do and he's just going to go do it. And if you're not ready for it, then... And I think Carlos Condit is exactly the kind of fighter who's not ready for it, whatever the start of the round will be, because Carlos Condit is one of the all-time terrible starters.
But he can probably take it. That's the thing. He can probably take it.
He can probably take it, and once he takes it, those middle rounds start to be weird because that's where you see like Robbie Lawler, he'll dominate a round and then something will adjust and the next round will just be like, yeah, shit, I don't know, I'm gonna get taken down a bunch and smile a lot, I guess. I'll get hit 4 or 5 times and just kind of shell up and let him beat me up for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And but then by the end of the fight, once he starts to realize that the fight's coming to the end, then it's like, okay, I'm just going to insta process all this information and beat the shit out of you for a round.
Yeah, and other times, like in the middle there, when he does get that adjustment, when it all comes together, he's just on fire. Like I said, that second and third round, start of the third round against Rory McDonald was some scary, scary shit. He was in there. He meant business. He was not going away. It seemed like he had a half-second advantage on everything that Rory McDonald wanted to do. And that's frightening. And the same thing in like the, I guess it was the third and fourth rounds against Johnny Hendricks in their first fight.
Yeah.
Was just like laser accurate. He knew every punch that was coming. He had gathered all the data he needed on Johnny Hendricks by that point, and he was ready with every single counter punch. Timing was keyed in, but getting that information, Carlos Condit's a round winner. Not early, but he throws enough volume to win rounds even when they're tough. And Robbie Lawler doesn't throw enough volume to win rounds even when he's probably in control.
Yep. It's tough. I mean, I got to pick Lawler. And part of this, too, is that I don't know how much faith I have in Carlos Condit right now. And I hate to say that because I love watching Carlos Condit. But these are two dudes who are fighting well past their sell-by date. Yeah. That's also got to be said.
And I think Condit's probably taken the more punishment. And, how good is a win over Thiago Alves in 2015?
Yeah. They started within a year of each other. Lawler started in 2001, Condit in 2002. They have both taken a lot of shit kickings in their day. They're both in their early 30s, and they're both at a point where the wheels could fall off at any time. And I tend to just kind of think that Condit might be like Lawler has this physical freak thing going on that I don't even know how to understand it. Like,
no,
he's fighting in a way that makes no sense to me as an analyst. He's fighting like he's fighting like he's Yoel Romero and just started like 2 years ago. If you know what I mean, like it's just like he looks like he's this fresh young guy who in his early 30s who like just started fighting in his early 30s and is like, hey, here I am, this physical god. I'm just going to start fighting right now.
Robbie Lawler looks like how they made him sound when he debuted the UFC. He looks like this young, muscled, lean destroyer. And I think maybe something about the fact that he seems to be still improving while Condit may not be.
Yeah.
Probably has something to do with the fact that he took all those years off of sparring where, he was getting beat up in his fights, but not
he was a shitty fighter, but it saved him.
Yeah, he wasn't sparring at all. And I know he is now at ATT, but that may really have done him some help. And now he's only sparring in like a tightly controlled environment where it's better for him not getting his ass handed to him at like Miletich fighting systems and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm picking Lawler. I can't pick against Bob. I can't do it. And I love Condit, but I am unsure of how great a win over Thiago Alves is right now. I am unsure of how great a 2013 win over Martin Kampmann is, frankly. Even, that I believe was one of Kampmann's very last fights, if not his last. Yeah, it was his last fight. And beyond that, Condit hasn't won the big fights. Yeah. There even it's people out there still saying, Nick Diaz, 125.
Seen a lot of comments about Diaz 125 in the past week. Seen a lot of them.
So I don't know how, I just don't know how potent I trust Condit to be. Like, even when he's, I don't know. I just don't trust it. And I don't trust maybe him not to just get, a random injury in the fight or to his chin to just crack suddenly. And I know he's about as tough a dude as they come in this sport, but that ends for everyone sooner or later. And Robbie Lawler is also still a monstrously tough dude.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm picking Lawler. I think that especially in the pocket, if it stays in the pocket, he'll have a huge advantage over Condit there, because Condit's a great clinch fighter, and he's a crafty range fighter. Give him on the outside and he will reel off great highlights. Get him closing down. He's great at coming in with a combination that surprises you and then getting you in the clinch and then working you over in the clinch. But if he has to just sit in the pocket and trade 4 or 5 strikes, he is the kind of fighter that gets lost mid-combination.
Definitely. Gets way out of position, standing up tall. Yep. It's a very weird kind of herky-jerky approach when he gets in close. And to cap it off with like an MMA math answer for why I think Robbie Lawler is a pretty strong pick here. If Robbie Lawler wants to counterpunch, and he can do it really well, he can do what Thiago Alves successfully did to Carlos Condit more effectively and with more power. Yep. And if he wants to pressure, which he can also do very well, he can sure as hell do it with better ring cutting than Nick Diaz. Mm-hmm. So, I think he can basically one-up Condit in either one of those game plans, and he can either force the pocket or he can let Condit create it. Either way, he's better in that range, and it's going to happen.
Yeah. And like we said, he's a good enough clinch fighter to beat Matt Brown there. So I don't think Condit is going to work him over in the clinch.
No, I don't see that happening. He really is strong in the clinch. It's just,
just doesn't do it that often.
No, exactly.
All right. On that note, the odds for this fight, Robbie, well, they're dead even. They are absolutely dead even across the board. Some people even have Carlos Condit favored. I would say Carlos Condit is, in fact, a very slight favorite. He is minus 103 down to minus 115. Robbie Lawler being minus 102 down to minus 115.
There's a minus 120 for Carlos Condit here.
Is there a minus? I'm not seeing it on. Oh, yeah, there is. Minus 120. Mm-hmm. So I would bet on Robbie Lawler, frankly.
I think Lawler deserves to be a bigger favorite than that.
Yeah, I do too right now. I don't think that I guarantee you right now that the quality of wins that Robbie Lawler has had since 2013, the quality of wins that Robbie Lawler has had since 2013 are much higher than the quality of wins that Carlos Condit has had since 2013.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Wins over Martin Kampmann and Thiago Alves are not as good as 2 wins over Rory McDonald, a win over Johnny Hendricks, and a win over Matt Brown. They don't say as much. Like, what Robbie Lawler's been doing right now is amazing. So,
agreed.
All right. On that note,
I think that's actually not a bad bet to bet on Robbie Lawler at those odds. I think there are a couple other lines on here that are kind of tempting. I think Tony Sims is not a bad bet, especially if you can get Tony Sims by stoppage. You can sweeten the odds there. You can get Michael McDonald by KO or TKO at underdog odds. So nice. That's still, I think, not necessarily a lock. We don't know how he looks, but if he's going to win, there's a solid chance he'll get a knockout. And I think Diego Brandao is a solid pick. As an underdog, I really think he's got a strong chance in that fight.
Oh, can you get Tumanov by knockout at underdog odds? Tumanov by KO TKO plus 105.
Well, there you go. If you're going to bet on him, then that may be a way to get it a little more favorable.
Yeah.
Though honestly, I don't think he's a bad bet at minus 250 either.
No. All right. On that note, it's time to wrap things up. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. Give us a like over on YouTube. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to MMANation.com. It's DOTCOM over on YouTube. That way you're always going to get the latest analysis, videos, interviews, all that other crap we do. And we will have a 6th round coming at you. We will have a full cordon of shows for the next card. Is actually we're going to have a week off, I believe. So we will have week off, and then we'll probably have If I Did It and Knuckle Up and all the shows we do in our normal weeks off. But then we'll have be warming up for Dillashaw Cruz, which should be a fun card as well coming up here. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.